Hello, survivors. Welcome to the State of Decay 2 stream. I'm your host, Jeffrey Card, and today we have a special guest, the first employee of Undead Labs, Steve Theodore, our technical art director. Hi, Steve.
Hi. How's it going, Jeffrey?
Oh, it's pretty good. Before we talk to Steve, though, let's go see who else we got in the room. It is Brant. Hello,
Big
Brant.
surprise.
Yeah. You remind me of Gary Brandon from the Technical Difficulties in that moment. That was weird.
I don't know what that is.
I'll have to tell you who that is later. But Brant, actually, let's look here. So Brant, where are you right now? You're playing in Nightmare mode, right? You're
yes.
paused in Nightmare mode, which is the safest place to be.
It is the safest place to be. I am in nightmare mode, and apparently the idea was Steve was going to make fun of my gameplay. But if you start to make too much fun of my gameplay, I'm going to hand this over to you. And
let's not do that. Let's not do that to the fans. That would not be fair to them.
Yeah, we actually had a question from somebody watching the stream. M of 3K asks, which difficulty does Steve Theodore prefer to play on?
Honestly, I typically play on the lowest difficulty because I spend all my time obsessing over graphics glitches. And so I'm constantly getting killed because I'm like, wait a minute, what the specular on those tree leaves is all weird. Wait, let me move my head around to see if I can figure out where that's coming from. And so it adds a lot of lethality, even at the lower levels.
Yeah, getting killed is just a distraction from what's really important, right?
Exactly. I'm a content tourist, and so it's definitely it is. I have to be super careful during playtests. I have to force myself to actually play the game.
Yeah, I have to I feel like I have to work hard sometimes to sort of swallow my pride and realize that there's some games that I'm not going to be good at, and playing them at the higher difficulty level means I'll see less of them because eventually I have to move. I have to play lots and lots of games to do this job, right? And so, like, if I want to see the next game, I have to get through the first one, and that means sometimes I need to lower the difficulty just to let the pressure off.
Yeah, typically the only games that I have taken like all the way to the max, there was Civ, obviously, and that kind of goes to my wheelhouse anyway. And then XCOM and Iron Man mode.
Oh wow!
Up until a tragic, very short of the end finale. But that's a whole other story. That I still haven't quite got over the PTSD.
Yeah, I've tried to play Iron Man mode, and I end up just feeling like trying to start over again because of one mistake.
Yep.
It hurts so badly. I eventually would I stopped trying to do it. I'm just like, okay, that's it. I'm just gonna be a dirty save scummer, and that's all.
Sorry.
Oh,
I just see somebody about a bug with a lot of yellow dots in the game map. So that might be our old friend, the mystery graphics tool. So
what is that?
Okay, so this is a good example of people who might wonder what my job is. My job is mostly worrying about things that are like super weird and mysterious. And so there is something in the game that occasionally decides to write memory into the GPU that's not supposed to be there. So like
something other than graphics.
Yeah,
goes into there?
Maybe 1 in 1,000 sessions, people will see things like a texture on that car will all of a sudden have what's obviously like a piece of UI written into the texture.
Wow.
Or it frequently manifests itself as everything turns black and green and purple because those are just like good zero-out values. There are a lot of systems that do dummy stuff. And so somebody mentioned that they saw the yellow dots on the minimap, and I wonder whether that's not what they're getting.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah, because it usually shows up in textures, like the ground texture is a good magnet for it, but it could also happen in other systems.
Brant, I am impressed with how well you're doing at this already. Like, I mean, yeah, it's a disaster, but it would have been way worse of a disaster if I had the controller.
Well, it's the stupid heavy swing weapon.
This is not the stupid heavy swing weapon. This is Brant being an expert player. Let's get that.
No, I meant that's why it wouldn't go so well.
So
I always get spun with that thing, and I never know what to do.
It's typically what you do, Steve, is you attack zombies with it. Have you played our game, dude? At all?
For
no, actually,
9 years now?
It's really funny because watching Steve play, he'll be running along and there'll be zombies all over, and he'll be like, "Oh, look at how that thing's rendering," and then he'll just stand there.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's an easy way to get yourself killed.
So do you want? Can you explain in like a little bit more detail, like what the technical art discipline is? Like, because I remember being on a lot of teams that had no technical artists, right? It was just artists and technical people, and there was a giant wall between them, and they never spoke.
So the official version is that Tech Art's about how the people who make the content for the game, so that'd be mostly artists but also designers, how they do their jobs. So we provide support for people to tell the game what they need to tell it. There'll be
So like if Brand is making a gun, there's certain things tools you've created for him to let the game know how that gun is held and how it operates.
Yeah, everything
that
from
kind
like where's the little marker where the left hand is going to go because it's not in the same place on every gun, to things like how to make it so that you just make a model and you hit a button and it shows up in the game, as opposed to you make the model, you hit a button, you see a dialog box with 50 little tweaky settings and you don't know what any of them are, and you're like, oh, what does this guy do? And then the game breaks. So we tend to try to hide that things from people.
Just kind of let artists art and try to remove the need for them to do anything else.
Exactly, yeah. Try to get it as close as possible to whatever they see in Maya or Photoshop or whatever tool they're using is the thing they get in the game. And then that's the core of it. And then around the outside, there's a lot of stuff to do with performance optimization. So like one of the folks on my team, for example, had to figure out how to make the game load off of disk fast enough so that if you jump in a car and you drive at high speed towards the other end of the thing, you don't like get there before the game has loaded that part of the world and just fall through infinitely.
I remember some really fun times like early in development when see, the roads, I think, are handled differently from everything else. So sometimes you'd be driving on a road, and you'd end up basically on the Rainbow Road from Mario Kart with, like, no world.
Yeah.
You just got ahead of the world. You're just driving on an empty road. The road is the only thing in the world. It was great.
Exactly. Yeah, it was very... so that kind of thing, like, there's a spectrum of stuff that we do, ranging from helping productivity for the artists, basically kind of get all of the silly, like, super tweaky, techie stuff out of the way for them, up to trying to change the way the game works in order to accommodate content. So like when you run around in State of Decay, you can hop those fences. Mm-hmm. Now, the animation for that comes from the artist, but knowing when that's supposed to happen is, there we go, there's, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things have to tell the game, this is a place where the character might be able to do that. And so we did the systems that lets the artist say, oh, this is a table or a chair. You would be able to hop over this side, but not that side.
And like this, and that fence is on a slope, for instance, so you could encounter it at a lot of different heights, and the character still has to get their hands on top of the fence.
Right, and then there's a mix of things like, there's some logic about, well, it's like a 50-degree slope, we're not going to let you do it, but it's a 37, and it's okay. So there's definitely this kind of fuzzy area in between what the heavy-duty programming staff does, what the artists do, and then we kind of operate in the middle, in between those two spaces.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of spaces when if a player wants to understand how your work impacts them, it's usually when they're going and interacting with something that's art that's made out of art. A lot of that is coming from your team. Or
so I'm on the technical side, right? Brand's spinning his flashlight around, right?
Yeah.
So you'll see how let's let him finish doing the search. But like when he looks around, you see how the room lights up because it's getting the bounce light from the flashlight.
Oh yeah.
So
right.
Matt Heidegger, one of our technical artists, part of his job is to set up the information that the game needs to bounce that light around inside. Not many games actually do this. A lot of games would just bake all of the light and then maybe add that flashlight on top of it. So it's really neat to have that kind of ability to do that in real time. It work, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stuff like lighting and stuff that is not just modeling or animation, but is something about the way that things come together in the final rendered product. A lot of that stuff is your team.
Yep.
Plus the tools that folks use.
Yeah. And then like shader programming and stuff like that. So like, there's some funny stuff like out in the world where when you see the grass as you're running around. So. Because we have to ship on Durangos, that is Xbox Ones, and we had a fairly low min spec on the PC, so we couldn't afford to do like a million different types of grass. So the grass that you see in the game is a mixture of just little triangles that look like grass, and then others that look like flowers and stuff, and then a really complicated thing on the GPU that occasionally just throws some of that away, so that instead of having to have 10 different kinds of foliage, which would have been very expensive, we have one, but it looks sometimes like grass, sometimes like a daisy, sometimes like a weed. And that's the kind of thing that we have to kind of figure out solutions for.
So you come up with a solution that's very complex to create, but when the game's actually running it, it's much simpler
Yeah.
for the computer to be able to handle it.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of our work is just sort of trying to set the computer up to make it affordable. Especially State of Decay has this big open world, and it also has the continually moving sun. That's actually a really hard problem. We had to put in a ton of work to get Unreal to actually do that at 30 frames a second.
We've gotten a couple of questions coming in from the audience. One is, why do some bolt-action rifles reload from the bottom when the magazine is on top?
I know just the man to ask for this.
Yes. Because we have a very limited set of animations to choose from for things like reloads, and we had to fib a little bit when it came to shotguns and like stripper clip style magazine rifles, things like that, where since you never really see that much of the reload, we were okay with allowing that sort of inaccuracy.
Like if this was a first-person game, you have to intimately see every detail of what you're doing with the gun. But in a third-person game like this, you can fudge a little bit, and that's good because then it saves us on animation memory and
it allows us to give you a much broader number of firearms and interesting things to do. So
like if we insisted on complete perfect accuracy to the real world, there's just guns we could not have for a long time until we got the animation support.
We would probably have 6 guns in total. I mean, seriously, if we wanted to do everything perfect, it would be a very limiting factor for us.
So another question is, what was the challenging aspect of the art from SOD1 to make it seem like a seamless transition into Heartland? I stumbled over that question, but I think you kind of get the gist of it.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting. That's actually a lot of weird things had to happen. This is the part of the job that is less obvious to players. So we shipped the first game on CryEngine, and basically there's zero similarity between the way those engines really, except at a really high level, they're just very different. And so, like in the old game, we didn't have this nice lighting that I was alluding to. Instead, what we did is every house in Marshall or the old Spencer's Mill had a bunch of vertex colors. So the model is made, and then we did this elaborate thing to basically fake. Okay, this is in the inside corner. It should be pretty dark. This is close, but it sees a window, so it has to be brighter. So we had to build and maintain all of that lighting ourselves. Bake it into the vertices. That was nice to be able to get rid of that. We had to replace it with the fancy solution that we did here.
Did you bring actual models from the original State of Decay over to Heartland, or did everything have to be recreated from scratch?
We use them as starting places.
Yeah, we essentially rebuilt everything that.
Yeah,
you could have it there for like a model or a template, but you would basically be building it from scratch.
Yeah.
And there was some nice stuff that we got out of the transition, because in this version of the game we had just like a good example is the bricks in downtown Marshall. Like in the first game, they were just textures. In this version, there's a slightly fancy shader so that there's a randomization, so you don't see the exact same repeat. Used to drive me crazy in the old game.
You'd be chased by zombies, but you'd stop and think, "Oh, those bricks are repeating. I can see a pattern."
Every 12 feet like clockwork, and it used to drive me nuts, and so I fixed it this time. So there was some stuff like that. Downtown Marshall has always been a performance challenge. It was in the first game, and it is in Spencer's in Heartland as well. But it was really fun to be able to go back. Although I'm super mad because in the first game I did all of those buildings. The store. This is a good piece of trivia for fans.
That's right.
Yeah.
So all those buildings in Marshall, right? They had this old-fashioned kind of decoration. They would have like these, looked like Roman columns or vases, stuff like that. So I did a little research during the first game. Turns out that in the 1870s and 80s out in the West, there was a big market for buying these storefronts. They were made out of tin by a company called the Metzger Company of St. Louis, Missouri. And there's like a whole genre of buildings with these very specific. You just say, "Oh, I want the Roman column over here, and I want the the twisty pipe here, whatever." So I found the catalog, and then I made 3D versions of that, and then used the generated normal maps and stuff to make the stuff that you see in Marshall. So that was really fun, and I was upset because I did not get the time to do what I really wanted to do on this pass, and put in take the original 3D models and put them in, because then you would have had like the actual like 3D relief, which would have been neater. But sometimes you got to compromise, and with all that blood plague downtown and all the zombies downtown, we really were not going to be able to afford it. So
Yeah, the blood plague, all that stuff really limited us in recreating an exact copy.
So Ryan Farrell in the audience wants to know, from a technical standpoint, would making a procedurally generated map be possible? There's a question of possible, and there's a question of whether you like the outcome.
Yeah, so I guess the obvious thing to think about is like procedural means different things to different people. So like there's like No Man's Sky procedural, where at least in theory you've got all these really complicated rules of like, all right, if you're on the shadowy side of the hill, you're going to get more ferns and fewer oak trees, or whatever it is, right?
You're trying to basically model reality creating this place.
Right, and so that's a really interesting place to go, and it usually doesn't fall down terribly, but as like No Man's Sky discovered, it's also sometimes difficult to get it to the point where like it feels, where players feel the hand of a creator, right? And so, and then there's lightweight procedures like, like we do this all the time, the grass and the rocks and stuff like that are rarely precisely placed by hand.
Somebody painted them on or decided this area needs grass, and then grass sprung up by some
Exactly, yeah, but it's not like everybody hand placed those individual pieces of grass, or like all the fences, the destructible fences and stuff. Like somebody says, I need a fence here, the colors, whether it's the 2 or the 3, or you hit the one where there's the fallen down piece, that kind of stuff is all randomized.
Yeah.
So we are definitely experimenting with more proceduralism for the future, because as we think about the future of the franchise, we want to be able to provide a wider variety of experiences. I don't think it's likely that we'll ever get to a point where it's just like, here's a completely push-button map, just because I think what I like as a player, and I love procedural tech, that's something I study and I think is super cool, but as a player, what I groove on is seeing the creator behind the screen, right? I love it when I run into the in-jokes and stuff that's obviously people having fun, and I wouldn't want to ship a game that had none of that.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And then there's just things you can get, like, your experience as a human tells you things about what it's like to live in a neighborhood, or what it's like to drive down a street, that a computer, it would take generations to train a computer to be able to replicate that exactly. You'd have to make a procedural system that's built out of big chunky pieces that were handcrafted, or something that to get those kinds of experiences into it.
There's some amazing tech out there. In my other life as a Roman historian, there is a company in Switzerland that makes procedural city building software. So you just draw some big roads and maybe a river, and then it's like, river's going to generate a port district, and then the big roads are going to have commerce near them, and the little roads are going to be where people live. It's amazing stuff, and it's a mix of hand-built content and procedural rules, but it's taken them a decade to get to that point. They did it. I only know about it because I happened to read up about it, because they did a version of Ancient Rome that worked that way.
And those are usually very coarse, right? It's just where the buildings are. It's not also every piece of furniture inside the buildings,
right,
and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think at different levels we do make use of procedural. I think a complete from scratch procedural would only really make sense for like outdoor environments. It's great for filler.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I could totally see a world where you have handcrafted towns separated by 5 minutes of hike through procedurally generated whatever. But that's kind of, that's more of a designer call than a me call.
Yeah, it's hard to build something that feels like it was built by humans unless it really was built by humans.
A bunch of the guys on my team are really experimenting with this sort of thing right now. But we're starting to look at Houdini, which is a really popular piece of software for exactly this kind of procedural stuff.
But that's more of a procedural tool for an artist to use to speed up. Like the artist is gonna build a bespoke map, but they use procedural to fill in gaps and get started, and then it's
exactly.
But ultimately, the decisions about where the buildings are and how it works is still the artist's.
Yeah, I guess what it boils down to is, because of what my job is, right? I want to empower the artists to make more and more interesting stuff and get them off the hook for things like, oh man, like there's a garbage, like somebody spilled garbage all over the room. Do I have to go and hand place all the garbage? Could I just do something that would dump it out on the ground and have it look okay?
Yeah.
So.
And I think there's some tools. I know that the character artists use a tool that like drapes fabric on a model, right?
Exactly.
Where you put a human body down, drape the fabric, and then bake that out. And you're like, okay, I've got some interesting wrinkled clothes now.
Oh yeah, and having done that, I used to do that, professionally, and I am so jealous. That was a way better way to work than like sitting there drawing individual triangles. Like, oh yeah,
Trying to make the wrinkles happen.
yeah.
You can come in if
So
you
we
like.
did have a quick question submitted. So for those of you who don't know, Steve was our Dev of the Month, and there's an article on our website about him. And we requested that people submit questions. We got a couple.
Well,
Desmond Bailey wants to know, what technical hurdles would adding dynamic weather to State of Decay 2 pose for your team? This is a question we get all the time. Like, can we add weather? And the answer is always, talk to Steve.
Okay, so look at what's on screen here, right? So pretend it's raining outside. It's actually really easy. For a while, we actually had dynamic weather running during the State of Decay 2 dev process. We didn't intend to ship it, but we were testing it. And so like drawing the little rain sprites that make it look like it's raining and, turning the lights down, having more clouds in the sky, we actually can do all of that. Where it gets really tricky is if Brent will hide the UI for just a sec, right? It's going to be raining out there, not in here. That's hard enough. It's actually surprisingly difficult. And then what makes it particularly tricky for a game like State of Decay, this house has a pitched roof. And so like we can say, oh, well, we'll just turn the rain off, around the footprint of the house. Well, you'd walk outside and you would see the rain
Stopping just above the roof.
top of the roof, right? Or, you might
Because
be
it's
able-
easier to do things in cubes than to do them in like,
Exactly.
random
Yeah, you do-
form-hugging shapes.
Right, you do that, and then you get weird, crazy things like, should it rain under a tree? If not, like, does it have to line up really closely with the visible appearance of the tree? And you have to have all of that data so what part of what I can see is potentially rainable on. You have to have all of that all the time, even when you're not using it. So it's not like it's an unknown problem. It's just a problem that has significant costs. And with a big open world game like this, we always have to be really careful about taking those kind of costs on.
I imagine also like the shaders and textures and stuff outside would have to like have what they look like wet and what they look like dry.
Right.
Which might be a lot of
Yeah,
art
exactly.
creation
And so there's probably
audio.
There's probably 8,000 to 10,000 core shaders in the game, right? So we just all of a sudden we'd have 16 to 20,000, right? And that those aren't super expensive just by existing, but they do cost something, right? So we're constantly trading off. Do this thing this way in order to save some memory. Do this thing some other way in order to save some CPU. A lot of my job is just like figuring out what's the worst thing we could do right now. Let's not do that. Okay, if we're not doing that, what's the next worst thing until we get to some stuff we can afford?
That makes sense. And so it's not like it's out of the realm of possibility theoretically, but we would have to decide this is the most important thing for us to do right now and make trade-offs against making sure weather got in.
And the kind of thing that I could see is like, you might be able to support it on one map and not on another, because one map might have some limitations on what kind of buildings we could use or what kind of topology, right? Because the other thing you got to think about is like, do we block rain from an overhang on a cliff, right? So, and then the other one that everybody always wants to know about is snow. And you can see some really neat demos of what some other games have done with snow. It's the same basic thing, right? Like it's actually well understood how you would render it, how you provide enough data that when you're rendering it, it looks good, and you're not like seeing it draw in ahead of you or something like that without busting the bank is always the tricky part. And again, it might just be like, hey, we do snow map, we do rain map, and then we do a regular map. But dynamically swapping between all of those in the same physical space would be a challenge. I know there are people in-house who would love that challenge. But it would be a challenge.
So Nightmaker wants to know, a couple of people asked what your favorite character from State of Decay was. And he specifically was wondering if there was like a character from State of Decay
there's
1
an easy answer
you
to
could
this.
bring in.
Well, actually, not for. I was a big fan of Pastor Will because I think I might have told this story on the previous stream, but in the original game, you had Pastor Will, and at one point very close to ship, like really close to ship, within a couple of weeks of close to ship. Somehow or other, Pastor Will's lines got reassigned, and so we were in the base, and at some point,
This is my favorite bug.
yeah, and then somebody, like two characters are having, Pastor Will and some other character interacting, and Pastor Will goes, "I'll cut you like a prison bitch,"
I'll shiv you, shiv you like a prison bitch.
and then he like leaves, right?
And he's the guy who
like the
is
voice
supposed.
of
Yeah,
something.
He's like the pacifist who's just too sweet for this world.
well, and you could even get like if you were out of stamina, you could actually call him in,
and he'd give you words of wisdom.
he'd give you words of wisdom. But yeah, he was there to threaten you.
So I miss Pastor Will, especially because he looked like my high school health teacher.
Well, and also Pastor Will was the guy who, even if your people were starving, he is the guy who would sit in the corner and eat the beans.
And it sounded like you were about to say Alan Gunderson before you changed your mind to Pastor Will. Is that?
No. Alan was never a favorite of mine.
No.
But
It was just the annoying voice, right?
no, but I was gonna say though in State of Decay
Oh,
2,
shoot.
I have a favorite character.
Hey, Mark,
Oh.
guess what I'm going to leave you with? Oh, it's not quite. I don't think it's quite deadly on fire yet. Except I'm in real trouble. So perfect time for Mark to take over.
So Mark Lautenbach's going to step in for Brant because Brant's got an appointment. So we're going to handle that. Somebody was about to say something about Alan Gunderson, though.
Oh no, it wasn't about
No.
Alan. So my other favorite character
that's
in
right.
State of Decay 2 is my kid, who's in there.
Oh,
His-
that's right. His face is in our game. That's true.
Yeah,
We
and-
won't tell you who it is.
Yeah, no,
No.
preserve privacy. Although there's some screenshots that you can send around at home that is very, maybe a little too close to the mark. So he was also incidentally the owl in Owl's livery, which was the cab in the original State of Decay.
Oh, nice.
Oh, I would also like to add before I go that Steve is responsible for the horrible Brant's Onion Emporium.
Oh, right. That was one of my
because-
favorite sites to write the name down for because I couldn't believe it was real.
Because Steve knows that I am allergic to onions and therefore, put them in the game. Yep.
Yeah, so you'd have to sell
Exactly,
all the
yeah.
ones that you had. Yeah,
All right,
exactly.
Mark. I am trying to get home. I've left you in a wonderful position, and
You've got a little hatchback on fire.
it's close to being on fire. So don't you dare hit anything. Everybody, take care. Have fun.
Yep. Say goodbye to
Brant.
Brant,
I leave
everybody.
you in the capable hands of Undead Mark.
And I should look through here and see what other questions we got for Steve. Let's see here. So Gooniverse read your article, your Dab of the Month article, where you talked about your education, which wasn't in necessarily
Games
tech
at all.
art.
That's correct.
So your education was in Roman history.
Yep.
And he wants to know
PhD dropout.
who were the first 15 Roman emperors.
Okay, let's do this from the top. I'm not counting Julius Caesar. Never actually held a thing. So you got Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba. These are the ones nobody's heard of.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to
Galba,
say, I knew all those first 5. I knew.
yeah. Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian,
Oh no.
Nerva,
Okay.
Trajan, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius.
Are you on 16 now?
I think so. Yeah. So I think it gets you through. Yeah, Trajan. Hadrian comes after Trajan, then Antoninus Pius, then Marcus Aurelius. So that would be 17.
So I'm actually kind of surprised. Like I've heard about half of those people. Like I didn't know. Like when you first got to like the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, I was like, who are these people? But like Hadrian, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius, I've heard. I don't know
They're all
anything
the
about these
famous
people.
ones, but they're famous.
Hadrian made a wall in England, didn't
Yep.
he? That's the only thing I know about him.
Trajan's got that big column in the middle of Rome.
Oh yeah. That's
Yep.
right.
The 4 that you didn't know, that's the year of the 4 emperors.
Oh, okay. That was
a
one
ci-
year. That's
yeah,
why.
it was a multi-way civil war, and I didn't even include Julius Civilis, who was also in that year.
I'm
but-
kind of surprised actually. Those first 5 were all people that like Caligula, Nero. I mean, they're famous for being terrible emperors, but they're still famous. And I assumed that
They
the
got
Roman
their own-
emperors I'd heard of would have been stretched out across a lot of no names, but they're all clustered together.
So what happens is, okay, a little slight
Yeah,
digression.
no. We are
What
here,
happens
we are
is-
all here for this Roman history. Let's go.
Okay. So it's all good up through right where I stopped. I
Yeah.
stopped with Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius' son Commodus, played by Joaquin Phoenix
Oh, yeah!
in Gladiator.
That's how I knew Marcus Aurelius.
Classic example of, like, you got to pay a little more attention to your parenting. And so it all kind of goes downhill from him, and you have so that takes you up to about, I think it's 220, something like somewhere in there. And after that, you have a series, you have basically 80 years of civil wars. And so you have another 50 emperors in 80 years. Wow. Yeah, no, like the average.
Are some of them simultaneous emperors fighting each other?
A few simultaneous ones, but a lot of it is just like, I take over, I'm emperor for 2 years, I'm murdered by one of my own guys who proclaims himself emperor.
Holy crap.
So
no wonder that empire fell.
No, it got better again after
What?
that. Yeah, no, they were tough bastards. They were hard to slow down.
Wow.
Yeah, so basically from, say, 225-ish, 230 to 300, roughly, it's just nuts. They call it the military anarchy.
Wow. So did all of them have the title Caesar in their language?
Caesar's a great example of how things work in the real world. So the reason you call somebody Caesar is because Augustus, number one, he won a bloody, vicious civil war. In his youth, he was known as the boy assassin because
Wow.
he was behind a bunch of
Great nickname for one of our characters.
Yeah,
Exactly.
totally. I want to go put that
so
in there.
so he teamed up briefly with Mark Antony of Antony and Cleopatra fame,
Yeah.
right? But then turned on him, and so he killed Antony and a lot of Antony's supporters, and this whole big thing. And so when he became emperor, it was after, this has been like 25 years of continuous, really rough civil war since Julius Caesar. And so he's like, it's all good. Don't worry about it, folks. Everything's fine. Nothing's changed. It's just like the good old days. So he didn't have a title or a job title. He was just Caesar. That was his last name. He was the adopted son of Julius Caesar. So he's like, just call me Caesar, right? I'm just a plain old Roman Republican dude like everybody else. And so he did it, and then Tiberius his adopted son picks it up, and then Caligula is in the family, so he picks it up. And by that point,
so it's a family thing, but then it kind of becomes a title? Like
it becomes a
morph?
title because we don't want to say king. Romans don't have kings, right? We're not into this whole king thing. Julius Caesar got
We just have the Caesar in charge.
Right. So we just, of course he's just Caesar. And then by Vespasian, so that's whatever, 79 or something, 70-ish. It's like, oh, you know what? Let's just call it Caesar because it's a good euphemism, right?
It's a euphemism for king.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't actually say king, and so you don't go.
Wow.
And then the first guy who actually tried to use king, like everyone's like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, that's not Roman.
They're all named after the salad.
Wow,
Yep.
that is amazing. So Goonie versus Impressed, his response is, damn! And he asks, do you have a favorite game based on Roman history? Is it just Civilization or
I'm a big
something
fan
else?
of the Total War games.
Me too.
Yes, I love those. I particularly, I have to say my favorite though was Rome 2 because there was that crazy thing where you would pick up followers. And I remember I had a game that was going so well. I like knocked off the Carthaginians and everything else, and then somehow or other, my best general picked up a follower with a rabid pet monkey, and like got died because he
Happens.
got bitten by the pet monkey later.
What?
It was like a really it was so infuriating. So, but it was very like this is exactly how history works.
See, whenever I play the game, I always want to play like the Gauls or somebody, just because I got this weird resistance to being the big empire. Like I always want to be the scrappy guys off to the side. So, but I'm glad that the game lets you play like pretty much anybody you want, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've been going nuts because my PC at home was dying, so I've been meaning to get back into Attila, which is the late Roman.
Oh,
version of that.
right, yeah.
And but my PC overheats really fast because it's summer and my cooling system's going, so I got to get that replaced.
By the way, so Yukiko Davila says, this is an amazing looking game. Thanks for the hours of entertainment, Steve. So we should throw those in sometimes.
You're seeing out of those hours of entertainment, you're seeing seconds of my work, and a lot of other people. Like Mark definitely made more things you see in the game than me.
Well, it's like when you're making what you're making is the glue that holds the game together and the tools that build the game. It's hard to say that anything in here doesn't somehow have your
Glue Maker.
little
Exactly.
little Steve Theodore signature on it somewhere. You know?
People have been sending me the glue factory for a while.
So
There's
I'm not
me.
expecting you to claim credit for all this stuff, but you know, like this game would look very different right now. Everything you're looking at would look very different if Steve's team wasn't there
This is
to
true.
facilitate all of it. So
Yeah, no, and definitely, I got to say, hats off to the folks on my team because they really, they made it possible to get this thing out the door at 30 frames a second. And that was,
Found everything
you
you
know,
gotta
it's
find.
that's a not a given, right? I mean, even a lot of big budget games, you know, it's like 24, whatever.
So one thing, I'm sure that in the chat, Megan has been pointing this out, but I should point out that we are doing a giveaway today, and if you want to join it, you gotta type !enter into the chat. In about 10 minutes, we're gonna close the doors on that, and we're gonna actually choose some winners. What we're gonna be giving away is access to those the pre-order packs and special vehicles and weapons and stuff that were only available to people who pre-ordered the game originally. So if you hit that, you'll have a shot at being entered in that contest. And so, not contest, giveaway. I think formally it is not a contest. But so wanted you guys to know that because we usually close that up at about 2:45. We're about 10 minutes away from that, and that's when we're going to do community. What do we call that? Community spotlight. We got a few folks in the chat. I think at least Big Lou I've seen in the chat, and we might have a video from Big Lou for us to watch in just a minute. So stick around for that.
Things are getting a little rough.
So Desmond Bailey, the one who was asking about dynamic weather, had another question. Sure. And this is another one about like hypothetical features that maybe the franchise would want to have someday.
Yep.
He asked about the challenge of making destructible buildings. I think picturing stuff like Battlefield, you know, where it's
Yep.
like you could imagine a juggernaut marching into a building and just taking a wall out. Like what do you think of when I suggest that?
Okay, so the good news is, remember that thing I was talking about with the lighting,
Yeah.
right? To a degree, that actually helps us out with that problem because one of the reasons most games don't do that is most games will just sort of like say, oh, you know, okay, sun's over here, bake all that down. Like I got some dark pixels here and some light pixels there, and which is all good until you blow a hole in the wall, and then it's like there's still
Everything has to change, and if it doesn't know how to
Right.
change, then
So that part's good. The flip side of it is, I don't know how many folks in the
by the way,
stream.
Mark just died,
I
and we
died.
have to point and say, "Oh, Mark, you died."
I died.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. Go continue, Steve.
But the other tricky bit is I don't know if anybody still remembers Red Faction Guerrilla,
Oh yeah, I love
right?
that game.
And yeah, no, so like I know the guys who made that, and like that's a really good example of why Destructible is tricky to do, because that means we got to carry around like, you know, here's our typical framed wood house, right? So if a juggernaut starts banging on the wall, what are you going to see? You're going to see the insulation, and you're going to see all of the 2x4s and the joists, right? And so we need to actually have content for that, and it needs to line up with the content that's already there. And so,
Yeah, I
like,
imagine it's really difficult to actually try to build the entire house to be destructible and actually be built out of its constituent parts versus pre-designing holes that can be knocked in walls. right?
exactly, which would be a totally legit cheat, right? Like, I mean, if you got it so that like the house had 6 or 7 places where a juggernaut could bang on it, and it never banged on any of the other places, that's a classic game industry. Like, let's fake it, and so we could do something like that. The main reason we would hesitate, I think a lot of people have wanted to do stuff like that. We got the fences in, after all. The main reason people would hesitate is that once you start doing that, you get all these pieces floating around out there. You have to hand control of the broken pieces over to the physics system, but you also need to be able to render them. And so you've got all of this extra content. Like instead of having one house, you now have one house with a broken version, and then you have broken pieces. So you got 2 things that you got to track, and then potentially many more of them as things go on. And people, you know, players will always find ways to maximize destruction.
Oh yeah, I remember like, playing the original Halo and going and like punching a grunt that was dead a million times until it completely filled the room with blood decals, and
Exactly.
it's slowed to a crawl.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we'd have to worry about. So it is doable. Supporting it to like the Red Faction level is really tricky because once you get down that road and you have to say like, well, is everything destructible?
Yeah.
Right? And if so, you got to pay for it all the time. And if you say only some things are, then you have to deal with the players who are like, wait, I can blow up this house, but I can't blow up this shed because we didn't get around to making the shed destructible.
But I think getting the breakable fences was kind of a big coup between State of Decay 1, where every fence was just an impenetrable wall you would just collide with really hard, versus now where like only some fences are impenetrable walls, but most of them you can actually just knock down.
Correct. Yes.
So that made a big difference to the game.
And that is definitely, like it's a good example of the kind of trade-offs we always have to make in game development. It's, you have to be consistent as much as you can, but if you were really consistent about everything, you couldn't possibly afford it. So,
What's going on here?
There are so many. You look so tired, Mark. Why don't you take a nap? There you go. Good. Yeah, you should take a nap.
Why were there 4 screamers?
Nightmare mode!
With no guns.
Your worst nightmare mode.
So, is it weird to look at the studio now when we've got more than 80 people working here now, compared to 2 people, which is like when you started, it was just you and the boss.
That's right.
Like how, you've run companies before. Like talk about like what that transition is like, and then like what you have to think about.
It's been very interesting. I mean, I've been through it a few times. Companies going from you could make a really big company out of all the people who were hired at companies I worked at after the company told me they weren't going to hire anybody because they didn't want to get bigger.
Yeah, and we've said that a couple of times here, and then we keep getting bigger because we keep wanting to make a bigger game.
Right, and there's this inevitable trade-off. You look at a Red Dead Redemption, right? I think that there's 4,000 man-years worth of work in that box.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Right, and so. If we took the entire Undead Labs team, right? What is that? 50 years, right? So, it's been neat to acquire all the new capacities, right? Like the first game was done on a real shoestring budget. There are a lot of kind of hacky, crazy, like, man, we just make this thing go.
Yeah.
And so that's fun. It is a little bit emotionally different because when there's 20 people, I mean, we shipped the first game, there were 22 at ship, but at least 4 or 5 of them only showed up in the last few months.
Yeah.
And so it was very intimate, and it was neat because everybody knew who did what, and everybody had the chance to just like, oh, I see a problem, I will fix it. I don't have to talk to management, I don't have to, get approval. It's just like, we're crazy getting stuff done, and we're just gonna do it. So I miss that aspect. I don't miss, I can't even. Some of the crazy stuff I had to do to get State of Decay 1 out the door, like up all night writing a thing in Crytek level format in XML so I could replace all of the rocks in the game with a different rock because it was too expensive, and it was like 2 a.m. and my eyes are bleeding, and that is having proper things to deal with that makes. I mean, now it's nice to be able to go home and have dinner with the family.
Yeah. So now that we've got a lot of things in place now. Like, cause I think in the article, one of the things you talked about was that you really liked about this company was their commitment to work-life balance, right?
Yeah, actually, it is. It's the best. I've been in the business now for almost 25 years, and my first game job was 95.
Wow.
And so
it's a different world.
Yes, it was a very different world. That company was 28, and it was a big company, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And although it was 50 by the time I left that company, and it ended up at like 150 before they got shut down. So even there, right, like the games industry growth thing goes on. But like it was really fun to be part of that little band of brothers thing. And we used to just do stuff like we could play music. There were fewer enough people, we could just play music over speakers in the office during the day because there weren't that many tastes to accommodate, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't get away with that now, right? It's just different. I mean, I wouldn't say better or worse. Folks in my line of work in particular, we tend to like the jack of all trades thing. So it was really neat back in the day when we just sort of just do stuff, right? Like,
yeah. No, exactly. So we've reached. It's about 2:45, and that's usually when we switch over to Community Spotlight, which means that Mark can actually take a break if he wants to, because we're going to switch to a view where we can't see the game anymore. So put on your headphones, everybody, oh crap! I can hear my own voice. That doesn't seem like a good thing. I'm assuming somebody would have told me if anyone in the audience could hear this. I need to figure out where this audio is coming from that I can hear that the audience probably can't. Oh, it's coming from Mixer. It's always coming from Mixer. Thanks, Mixer. Okay, anyway, I hope that you guys haven't been hearing doubled audio this whole time. I'm pretty sure somebody would have complained about it, but I was hearing it and it was driving me crazy. Okay, so here's what we've got. So first off, this image right here. This is from Buck. At Dead Man's Breath, and he said the sign here. You can see this sign right under the word community. The sign says "Do not enter." Damn right, you zombies can eat first. I can wait. So yeah, let's let those zombies. They can have all of the utterly delicious swine and bovine food that they want. We'll just go in there later. So thanks for submitting that, Buck, and we'll take his name off there because we got some videos to watch. So this first one, this one comes from Diego A. Shineman, and Diego called this one Jetpack. So Diego is very nice and speeds up the run-up to what's going on, gives you some context, but he plays the beginnings of his videos in rapid fire. You can tell that something's about to happen when it slows down again. So we'll just get over to where this thing starts. There we go.
Here? I could really use a hand.
Is anyone in here?
So I imagine that if we ran into that bug, yes, somebody probably might refer that to somebody on their team to figure out what's going on with the markup.
I suspect what happens is, can people?
Oh yeah, they should be able to.
Okay, so I think what happens in a case like that, character goes into the markup animation, but we temporarily suspend their physics during the interval while they're transitioning from I'm here standing on the ground to I'm up here. Mm-hmm. And during that interval, I think the zombie walked into where the character used to be. And so
gotcha.
The
and flung them up in the air?
Yeah, so then at that point, the physics system says, oh, you're interpenetrating, so I have to undo that, and the zombie can't go down, he's on the ground, and I can go up, so boom.
I'm so glad we have you here for this. This is great. So that wasn't the only video that Diego posted. Actually, Diego started an entire trend of watching characters behave weirdly. This one right here, he said, Os bonecos brincando na circuita, and I can't speak Portuguese. He said the dummies are playing around in the middle of the apocalypse. So after he's done fighting these guys, let's see who he actually who he's talking about. So you saw some zombies run off to the right over here, and they're just what are they doing? They're stuck on this markup.
Yep.
And they keep thinking whichever side they're on, they think they need to be on the other side of it.
They're cats.
I mean, they look actually kind of comfy and cuddly on that thing. Like I kind of want to get on there with them. It looks like, I don't know, like a fun game of Twister or
it
something.
looks like a CrossFit.
Yeah, I wonder whether the AI is getting confused about whether it has gotten to the next link in its navigation chain, and so the it's hard to know. It's not clear whether the AI is confused about where it wants to go. Like maybe it's trying to be right under where that fence is, and so
no matter what, it feels like
the closest it'll
it's,
ever get is
yeah.
to be there, do the animation, and then keep doing it. Or it could be that the navigation mesh that we use to say, all right, you can go from here to there. It knows about the fence, but if the link got broken, it would be like, oh, I'm over here now. I can't get it. There's the only thing that I get to on the other side of this fence is back over the fence I came from.
Gotcha,
and
yeah.
So it keeps trying to
it
do
looks
that.
like there's something about the fence because like 3 zombies hit it. They all did the exact same behavior.
It's probably the fence's
something about
fault.
that spot.
Is that why you see someone like running in circles?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I've been seeing that a bunch in places I can't talk about. So the next one comes from Big Lou 521. This is another case of some zombies just really loving the markup. So in this case, so Big Lou labeled this "Jugs just want to have fun." So
I've always loved the jug hop. Yeah, this is almost certainly the same bug, just with a different piece of content.
Yeah, only this time, eventually, I think the horde that they were a part of moved on, and so they're no longer trying to be in that spot, except right there. But I do love it really conveys the size of these juggernauts. It's something that everyone else has to plant a hand to jump over. It just gets its feet up, and it gets back down like it was nothing.
They got hops.
And then, so thanks, Big Lou, for submitting that. And then we've got Kajiro's Flaw, who found another one, only this time it's humans. He said that this enclave just showed up to have a good time. And they're just rolling around,
What?
having a blast. He's like, "Out! If you can't beat him, join him." When in Rome,
Exactly.
as they say. I love that one, right? They're just all in sync with each other. So yeah, thanks for submitting that, Kajiro. And last but not least, we've got an amazing skill shot by one of our favorites, Beats and Buttons, who has an elaborate Twitter handle now that's just a little bit too much for our screen. But let's check this out. So so what did he say? You can doubt my bad driving skills, but the video proves them. Special pickup and delivery options for all your Zed needs. So check out what he does here. He's got the scoop on the front of the pickup truck to make hitting zombies a little easier. Woo! Yes!
Nice.
So people used to try to carry things in the back of pickup trucks in SOD1, and it was always kind of a little bit of a disaster, but that one went pretty well.
It was smooth.
So that's Community Spotlight. So if you folks, if you guys want to share, especially Twitter is the place where we get most of our submissions. But so if you guys want to use hashtag Funny Survivor Stories and post things on Twitter, and we also watch Instagram and Facebook for this stuff, though it's a little bit harder to share. Post your stuff, and we would love to include it here on our stream. And another thing that I should point out is that we've got some winners for. Let's get back to, if you want to go back to playing the game, because we got about 9 minutes left to kill.
Or die.
Or die, or whatever we're gonna do. We did get some winners. So Megan just sent me here. So Wojtek Barton wins. Is one of our winners. Got the SHTF pack. So each of these packs has got a name. We've got so each person gets a particular pairing of like a weapon and a vehicle. So so Wojtek Barton gets the what?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, he's got the nail
Oh,
puller.
he's got the nail puller. Yeah.
I hate the nail puller.
The SHTF pack. Private Garnet wins the Preppers pack. Dieter Kelly won the Survival pack. The Lizard King 23 won the Apocalyptic pack. And Ryder X360 wins the Survivors pack. And so, okay, so, and everybody, all of you people who I just announced winning, make sure you contact Megan at social@undeadlabs.com. So that's her email address, social@undeadlabs.com. Contact her, let her know that you're one of the winners, and please be cool and don't lie, and get that to her, because she doesn't have a lot of, I think none of you are in a position where she has an easy time whispering at you, so get that information to her, and she'd love to reward you with codes for those prizes. And thank you for being here, all of you. Thanks for participating. So, let's see if we've missed any questions that have come in. So should we ask Steve about some more Roman history? Because Gooniverse really wants to know what drew you to it in the first place. Like, why that era and not something else?
That is actually a really interesting question.
You can
So
lose these if you
can I
want to.
take these off?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay. So I think for me, I think it's because I read a lot of out-of-date books when I was a kid. Right, so like my head was about 50 years behind where I really was, where the world was, and so I kind of thought, oh, this is what you got to do to be an educated person, and I did not realize that that ship had long since sailed. And then Roman versus some other form of ancient, mostly because I'm actually really bad with languages. So I had to do, in order to get into grad school, you had to do Latin, Greek, French, and German.
Oh, wow.
And but the Greek was definitely a stretch. It's a crazy language, and so with its own alphabet.
Oh, yeah.
So
I've never tried to, so one time I tried to learn a little bit of hiragana, just to be able to understand what's going on when I was reading like Japanese text and stuff like that. And, Duolingo is kind of a fun little game, but it's really hard to learn a new alphabet. And, so I imagine Greek would have been a big obstacle.
Yeah, well, the thing that got to me is I'm sloppy and lazy. It's my big problem. And in Greek, like the accents and there's a little comma that you put before or after things to indicate. So like it's the difference between ah and ha.
Oh,
and
okay,
so
gotcha.
it's really easy to get yourself messed up if you don't pay attention to those things. And I'm exactly the kind of lazy, kind of disorganized person who does not pay attention to those things, and it showed in my grades. So Latin was easy because Latin was I already had the right alphabet, and I had a little bit of it in high school. So
I imagine that helps. So do you have a favorite base in the game?
that is an interesting question. See, like I
Always
actually
interesting question.
I still miss the old church base from the first game. Mostly because I had to tear that thing apart and rebuild it probably 8 times during the course of making the game, so I got super familiar with it. The whole built-ins thing is always a lot of fun. I just got a kick out of seeing what other people did. Nowadays, I have very mixed feelings about the Jurassic Junction base in Heartland because I miss, it's got that nostalgia thing going on, which is great. It's so big, I always feel like I'm not making good use out of it. I know it actually works really well for the Heartland gameplay, but I kind of want to be a completist about it, which isn't exactly how Heartland wants you to play. So I have to discipline myself.
See, I always like the really small bases that make you choose between critical things, and you need both of them, but you only get one. So things like the bridge fort is actually is one of my favorites, partly because I like that sort of challenge of you can only have one thing. What are you gonna do?
Yes, although the bridge fort involves some performance challenges that.
Oh, I can imagine.
I can never enjoy the bridge fort in the same way.
It's too much trauma. In
yeah,
your background.
exactly. Oh my God, there were some things we had to do to make that shippable. That. Any other ones?
So let's check in with Mark. So where have we gotten right now? How many? Are you down to 2 community members?
One of them is almost dead.
Okay, cool. This is the one who's maybe gonna live another few minutes.
No. You missed a couple months ago. I
That's
was
a good one. Okay,
very
go for it.
close to death.
This one there.
Yeah. So let's see here. So if State of Decay 2 had the graphics of the first game, would that somehow allow for more content in game, or does it not work that way? Do you have to sacrifice graphics for other things?
Up to a point, that is kind of how it works. You do have to, so, especially on a console, you just have a fixed bucket of memory that you can deal with. And on a console in particular, on your PC, you probably are not going to run out of memory because most people these days have an 8 gig, right? And then you've got an additional stock of memory on your graphics card as well. And so it's not, even a pretty not super impressive PC is likely to be 2 to 4 times more resources than the Xbox One will. And so the complexity of the models and the number of the textures and all that stuff, that all comes out of the same place. And so if we made all the characters have half as many polygons, if we had all the models in the game had half as many polygons, that would save about as much memory right now as, say, all the animations in the game. So we could have twice as many animations if we cut all of the models in half, is a good example. The big one that's always really tough on the Xbox One in particular is the textures. So that all goes into a big pool, and we have a fixed amount of it. I think it's 500 megs, something like that. And that's all you're going to get.
I would have accepted any number that you said right there.
Yeah, I forget because it was 4 for a long time, and I was very unhappy about that because my original budget for it was 1 gigabyte. But when we switched to Unreal has a lot of housekeeping requirements that just can't be avoided, and so we lost a ton of memory to that, and therefore most of that came out of textures. So occasionally when you run around the game, you'll actually be able to see things look kind of mushy, and then you'll stand still for a while, and then they get better. That's because the stuff closer to you wants to grab more memory out of that fixed pool, while the stuff farther away doesn't need as much, and so gradually what you're seeing...
So they use lower res textures that are murkier and
exactly.
less detailed.
Yeah, because as you cut it in half, everything gets fuzzier and softer. And unfortunately, we don't have anything in between powers of 2. That's just the way graphics hardware works.
Yeah.
The question was, could you have more gameplay? You could have more stuff, right? A model, a texture, an animation. Ultimately, they all paid for in the same currency, which is just memory.
But what about things things that are CPU intensive, like AI? If we cut down the graphics, would that actually let us have more AI characters out there, or is that a completely different pool of resources?
They overlap, but not totally. Our biggest problem for CPU from the graphics side is always the shadows. So we render the world, we hand off a copy of all of what you see here, and that gets sent over the graphics card to be rendered. But we have to do that twice. We have to do it once when we're rendering the thing you're seeing, but once again from the perspective of the sun to render the world so we can see the shadows, so we see what is or isn't lit up, and then we combine those two to get the final thing.
Wow.
And so every object that you see in the world, that's one more little job that you have to do, right? So if you have 1,000 things, I got to send 1,000 things to the GPU and then 1,000 things to the shadows. If you've got 10,000 things, right? So that is a significant cost that we have to manage all the time. So if we didn't have shadows, for example, we could just have more stuff.
So if we decided to have like just a very cartoony game, then we changed the style completely, so that they're specifically targeting reducing costs, then we could probably get other stuff. But trying to do a realistic style game, you can't do that without shadows, right? And
exactly. And then like in this scene, Mark's running around with a flashlight. He's on a Scorpio, I think, right?
Yeah, he's on a Scorpio.
So he's got a shadow casting flashlight, but on a lower end platform he wouldn't have that. You'd have it, but nobody else in your game would have it. Because again, it's the same thing, right? If you turn on your flashlight, then you're sending
another
all that
rendering of everything to
right.
figure out where the shadows go. Yeah.
And so, it's not exactly all one bucket, but it is close to that.
There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
So we are out of time. So first up, I really want to thank Steve for coming in here and talking to us.
Steve.
Even just looking at funny bug videos was like twice as interesting with your insights here. So we really appreciate it. We also wanted to call out the fact that on our Discord, we've got a link to a survey that we've been doing in the wake of Update 10, which was the Bounty Broker update. We really wanted to know like what players felt about it, how players engaged with it. And so if you go to our Discord, which is discord.gg/undeadlabs, I believe, go to our Discord, join our community. We want to hear from you all the time. But specifically, I think posted pinned to the news area, there's an access to that survey. So please go check that out. And in the meantime, Mark will try to escape these flaming zombies, while the rest of us just sort of slowly fade out into oblivion. And we'll see you guys later. They can still hear us for the next 15 seconds.
Okay.
So we can say whatever we want.
Well, I was just going to say, keep it up, Mark. You got to catch up with Ninja.
Oh, yeah.